Hello, English Language Arts students. My Paradigms 12 students, more specifically, we are going to be looking at the story The Monkey's Paw by W. W. Jacobs. I have read this story many times over my lifetime, and I never get tired of it. Kind of interesting. I read it first when I was, I think, in seventh grade, and then I read it again in high school, and then in college, and then I've taught this story a few times. So I'm, I don't know, I just never get tired of the story. It's got so many great qualities. It's kind of spooky, mysterious, suspenseful, but it's also got historical meanings, and I don't know, it's just full of rich elements that I'm hoping I can help point out for you while we do this close reading together. The lesson targets that I'm looking at here are that you will be able to demonstrate that you understand the story, W. Jacobs' story, The Monkey's Paw, through close reading strategies, which help us understand things a little more deeply, right? And then I want you to be able to identify and interpret some themes that are present in the story. One of them is British imperialism in India, and you had some background information and a couple of assignments that went with that. So there was a video about British imperialism, and then I created a quiz for you to go along with that. There was also a video and quiz about the game of chess, which plays a part in the story. And then I'm hoping we can also discuss fate versus free will, because we are studying man versus supernatural. And then what are the consequences of greed? And greed kind of fits in with this British imperialism theme as well. I am also looking to see that you can infer, that you can make predictions about a story's outcome based on text evidence and prior knowledge. So I'm going to be asking you to do things like consider foreshadowing and other predictions. In fact, I believe I had you make predictions about why the poem There Will Come Soft Rains was used inside of Ray Bradbury's story, There Will Come Soft Rains. So you've had some experience with making predictions in this course so far. And then the last thing I have here is students will demonstrate their understanding of the monkey's paw through answering of multiple choice questions, written responses, and creative interpretations, all supported by text evidence. We're always hitting that really hard, that you can't just, give your opinions of things. You've got to have things to back up your claims. Standards addressed in this particular lesson are going to be standard 2. I could have added standard 1 here as well, which is that text evidence standard. But I want you to be able to determine themes in your reading, central ideas, things like that, and how different themes emerge throughout a story. I want you to be able to find words and phrases that you're unfamiliar with and either figure out what that means based on the connotations and the context of the story. And if you still can't get it, that you're able to use resources to look that up. And then also, I want you to consider how certain word choices that W. W. Jacobs uses impacts the meaning, the tone, the mood of this story. And I also included standard for reading literature 6, which is how this particular author employs point of view, perspective, purpose, that he's got explicit and implicit messages. We're going to be highlighting some implicit messages. This ties back to the British imperialism thing. And then how they use irony, understatement, things like that. And also why this particular author's culture, perspective, geographic location, identity, how that made a difference in his writing of The Monkey's Paw. All right. I have 2 ways for you to access the story, and I will have a PDF of these slides available for you. You can either access it here, which this first one, which is the story pages that I've included in this slideshow. I am realizing once I copied them into the slides, they became a little bit blurry. So if that drives you crazy, I also included a link to a another copy, a PDF of the short story. It's a little less visual. It's just the, oh my gosh, sorry, it's not letting me go over there. I was going to open it and show you, but it's not letting me go there. Um, it's more of just the text, no pictures or anything like that. So not as rich, but a lot easier to read for some of you who feel like these slides are a little blurry. Also, I want to point out, I'm going to give you a link to the audiobook, and I love providing that for my students, and I really think like it's very, very helpful for many students to listen to the audiobook while they're reading. But please know that I do expect that you read along, that you're not just listening to the audiobook, because you'll need to be able to reference passages and such. So I want you to be able to see the text along with hearing the text. And it also hits two parts of our brain when we do that, right? We're getting all the visual stimulus, and then we're getting that audio stimulus too. So it's two ways for our brain to find meaning in the text. All right. So W.W. Jacobs, William Wymark Jacobs was his full name, and he went by W.W. Jacobs. And I thought it was kind of fun to point out that I could just picture a little boy running around on the wharfs along the Thames River in London. His dad was an English wharf supervisor, and I believe his mother died when he was very young. And so his father probably didn't have adequate child care. And so this boy ran around and probably learned and got his street smarts very, very quickly. And when he became a storyteller, his favorite story subject was marine life. You'll notice that favorite is, I did the British spelling here, considering that he's a British writer. He is actually most famous for the story that we're going to read, but mainly wrote humorous stories. So the fact that this is kind of a mysterious, suspenseful, kind of scary story is not indicative of most of what he wrote, which was humor. And I did want to add this last part. He was likely very put off by Britain, his home country, their stronghold of India during this British Raj. And because you watched that video, you'll know what I mean by British Raj. And it's very evident in this story. I shouldn't say very evident. You really kind of have to be looking for it, which is what I'm hoping to do for you, because I think it gives us a much more rich reading of this story to know about that British Raj, what that British Raj influence on this story. So see if you can kind of pick up on some of these nuances. All right, so we've got this exposition, and the setting is a cozy evening. We've got family gathered in the common room. It's Mr. and Mrs. White and their son. Mr. White and his son are playing chess, and in your PDF version, I've got a link here to Wikipedia's explanation of the game of chess. Mrs. White is knitting by the fire. Sergeant Major Morris drops by for a visit. And I want you to realize that there's this stark contrast between the ambience inside the house versus outside the house. Why does an author do that is some of what I want you to be thinking about. Why did he make such a stark contrast? And then what is chess? What is this game of chess? The object is to trap the opponent's king. When a player says check, it signals that the opponent's king is in danger of being captured. So look out, check yourself. When the player says checkmate or mate, it signals the opponent's king is trapped and the game is over. And I wonder if that is some kind of foreshadowing. And making predictions is what strong readers do. So why do we think chess is part of the story? Why do we think the son saying mate? And this idea of the king being in danger, being captured, what does it have to do with the overall meaning of the story? Because authors don't include things accidentally. They put things into their writing very purposefully. All right, this is sort of about the exposition too, but I just wanted to put in here this, this came from a textbook, building background, time and place. It's good to know this stuff. The Monkey's Paw takes place in Laburnum Villa, the cozy home of an elderly English couple and their grown son. It is probably sometime in the late 1800s. And then it says, did you know that as the story opens, Mr. White and his son Herbert are playing chess, a board game for two players. Each player has 16 pieces, a king, a queen, two rooks, two bishops, two knights, and 8 pawns. Now, you heard in the video that you watched that chess has changed through the years, since its inception. And as it's globally become more popular. So it didn't originally start with these pieces, but that's what it is in modern day. And then these pieces move strategically around the board. The game is won when one player attacks and then captures the opponent's king. A player usually announces the attack by saying check, and the final victory with the word checkmate or mate. So I grabbed this. This is the video you watched, by the way. But I grabbed this passage from the first page or the opening of the story where it says, Father and son were at chess. The former, who possessed ideas about the game involving radical changes, ding, 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 putting his king into such sharp and unnecessary perils that it even provoked comment from the white-haired old lady knitting placidly by the fire. Again, authors do things very purposefully. This idea that the father possessed ideas about the game involving radical changes. All right. So this game of chess has some metaphor, it sounds like, for Mr. White. And then he's putting his king into such sharp and unnecessary perils. That also for me was I wonder if this is a foreshadowing of something ominous. So we're going to be on the lookout for that. All right, so I just talked about that. This is just securing what I just mentioned. What might this passage be foreshadowing? This radical changes, these unnecessary perils. I feel like putting his king into such sharp and unnecessary perils means, is he going to put other things? Is he going to put his family into sharp and unnecessary perils? I don't know. Let's look. All right, so now you're going to see what I mean by these pages being kind of blurry. My apologies. That's just how they copied over for me. And you can zoom in to see the slides better. If you click, there's a couple ways you can do it, but if you click View and then Zoom Menu, that's one way to do it, zoom in and out, or like go to 150 or something. You can also go right here where it says zoom 150%. You can zoom in and out there. My eyes have just gotten bad over the years, so I'm going to have it pretty zoomed in here. I also want to be on the lookout for this setting the mood that the author does here. I want you to again look for these contrasts of the outside versus inside of the home in this opening scene. And then we're also going to be looking, I've got arrows here, we're going to be looking for this idea of the allure of the exotic. All right, here we go. Without, the night was cold and wet, but in the small parlor of Laburnum Villa, the blinds were drawn and the fire burned brightly. Father and son were at chess, the former, who possessed ideas about the game involving radical changes, putting his king into such sharp and unnecessary perils that it even provoked comment from the white-haired old lady knitting placidly by the fire. Hark at the wind, said Mr. White, who, having seen a fatal mistake after it was too late, was amiably desirous of preventing his son from seeing it. I'm listening, said the latter, primly surveying the board as he stretched out his hand. Check. I should hardly think that he'd come tonight, said his father with his hand poised over the board. Mate, replied the son. That's the worst of living so far out, bawled Mr. White, with sudden and unlooked-for violence. Of all the beastly, slushy, out-of-the-way places to live in, this is the worst. Pathway's a bog, and the road's a torrent. I don't know what people are thinking about. I suppose because only 2 houses on the road are let, which means like rented out, they think it doesn't matter. Never mind, dear, said his wife soothingly. Perhaps you'll win the next one. Mr. White looked up sharply, just in time to intercept a knowing glance between mother and son. The words died away on his lips, and he had a guilty grin on his thin gray beard. So, my understanding of this, if I read it closely, means he was kind of, you know, he was kind of angry or, not too happy about just having lost the chess game. So, he shows his anger through talking about how horrible their um, property is in terms of like outside, that it's muddy and all these things. Okay. There he is, said Herbert White, as the gate banged too loudly and heavy footsteps came toward the door. The old man rose with hospitable haste, and opening the door, was heard condoling with the new arrival. The new arrival also condoled with himself, so that Mrs. White said, "Tut, tut," coughed gently as her husband entered the room, followed by a tall, burly man, beady of eye and rubicund of visage. I think that just means ruddy red skin. Ruddy and rosy in the face. Yeah, that's what it says down at the bottom in the footnote. Sergeant Major Morris, he said, introducing him. The sergeant major shook hands and, taking the proffered seat by the fire, watched contentedly while his host got out whiskey and tumblers and stood a small copper kettle on the fire. At the third glass, his eyes got brighter. So I think the Sergeant Major Morris was getting a little buzzed here. And he began to talk, the little family circle, regarding with eager interest this visitor from distant parts, as he squared his broad shoulders in the chair and spoke of strange scenes and doughty deeds, of wars and plagues and strange peoples. This is where I have these arrows talking about the allure of the exotic starts to show up here. People in this time period were very interested in and excited about the exotic, and they didn't know well enough to realize that people in other cultures aren't spectacles, right? Just because they live differently than we do didn't mean they were exotic peoples that should be, you know, I don't know. It's so hard to explain what I mean, but it just kind of makes me cringe when I think of people looking at other cultures as if they're strange. Yeah, they're different than you, but they probably think we're strange too. All right. At the third glass, his eyes got brighter and he began to talk, the little family circle regarding with eager interest this visitor from distant parts, as he squared his broad shoulders in the chair and spoke of strange scenes and doughty deeds, of wars and plagues and strange peoples. 21 years of it, said Mr. White, nodding at his wife and son. When he went away, he was a slip of a youth in the warehouse. Now look at him. You don't look to have taken much harm, said Mrs. White politely. I'm going to ask you later what you think Mrs. White thinks of this Sergeant Major. I don't know. I always get the feeling that with her tut-tut and her don't look like he's had much harm done to him. Like, does she? I don't know. Is she not sure of this guy, or what is she thinking? I'd like to go to India myself, said the old man, just to look around a bit. Better where you are, said the sergeant major, shaking his head. He put down the empty glass and, sighing softly, shook it again. He wants more whiskey. I should like to see those old temples and fakirs and jugglers, said the old man. What was that you started telling me the other day about the monkey's paw or something, Morris? All right, so here's our first introduction to this monkey's paw. I'm looking at this picture here, and it says it's by Frank John St. J, 1900, oil on canvas. And in the book, the textbook that I got this from, what does the posture of the man in the painting reveal about his character? How is this man similar to Sergeant Major Morris? And I think they did a good job here of capturing what he probably was like. He's sitting erect. He's got very proper, I guess, air about him. Also down here in the footnotes, what is a fakir? It is a member of a Muslim or Hindu sect who takes a vow of poverty and lives by begging. Fakirs sometimes do extraordinary and dangerous tricks. So that's part of that exotic allure that Mr. White is interested in. All right, this is at about 20 minutes, and I don't like these segments to go much longer than that. So I'm going to pause here and we will do another part at a later time. I will see you soon.